Imagine a courtroom so silent you can hear the echo of your own heartbeat. A police officer walks in, filled with authority. And in front of a packed gallery, he slaps a man across the face, but here is the twist. The man he struck is not a criminal. He is the chief judge presiding over the very trial. What happens next will shatter the meaning of justice, expose secrets buried for years, and turn the entire courtroom into a battlefield of truth and power. Do not look away, because the story you are about to witness will keep you questioning every sound, every shadow, every breath until the very end. Stay tuned, because this is a trial unlike any other. The courtroom was silent. The air was heavy, almost suffocating. Every creak of the wooden benches echoed like thunder. The officer walked in, boots striking the floor with sharp authority. He scanned the room with narrowed eyes, his jaw tight. In the front row sat a man, calm, composed, dressed in a simple dark suit. The officer's glare fixed on him. Something about the man's stillness irritated him. The officer marched forward. Without hesitation, his hand snapped across the man's face. The crack of the slap split the silence like a gunshot. Gasps filled the chamber. The man did not flinch. He turned his head slowly, eyes cold, steady, piercing. The officer's confidence began to waver. The silence stretched. Every breath in the room felt louder, harsher. And then the man rose. The scrape of his chair against the stone floor was deafening. His presence towered over the room. He adjusted his tie. Calm, deliberate, and in a voice that cut through the air, he spoke. "You just assaulted the chief judge, presiding over this very trial." The officer froze, his face drained of color. Whispers rippled like a storm through the courtroom. The walls seemed to close in, the air thick with dread. The officer's hand trembled, still hovering in midair, as if the moment itself refused to release him. The man's eyes never left his. There was no anger in them, only something far more dangerous, control, and the silence that followed was more terrifying than the slap itself. The officer's mouth opened, but no words came. The courtroom doors creaked, as if the building itself was reacting to the weight of the moment. Every eye stayed fixed on the two men. The chief judge stepped closer. His footsteps echoed, slow and deliberate, each one striking like a gavel. The officer's breathing quickened. Sweat began to bead on his forehead. Sliding down, the figure rose slowly, the brim of the hat sliding back just enough to reveal a sharp smile. Gasps rippled through the gallery, low and uneasy. The bailiffs tightened their grip on their batons, stepping closer. But their movements carried hesitation. The figure's voice broke the silence. Calm, steady, unsettling. "So," the judge finally notices. The words rolled through the courtroom like smoke, curling into every corner, suffocating. The judge's eyes narrowed, his jaw clenched. "You dare to infiltrate my court?" he said, his tone cutting like steel. The figure chuckled, low and deliberate. "Infiltrate? No, Your Honor. I own it." The words sent a shockwave through the room. The officer's mouth fell open, his trembling now uncontrollable. The juror dropped back into his seat, head buried in his hands. The gallery erupted in whispers that grew into frantic voices. The judge struck his gavel with violent force. "Enough!" The echo was deafening, silencing the chaos instantly. The figure stepped forward on their own, unfazed by the bailiffs. Their shoes clicked against the floor. Each step measured, confident. The judge's gaze burned. But the figure did not falter. "You are not the one in control here," the judge declared. But the figure only smiled wider. "Then allow me," they said, "to show this court who truly writes the verdict." The lights flickered. The walls seemed to tremble, and for the first time, the judge himself felt the creeping chill of the flicker of the lights left the room in half shadow. Faces glowed pale under the uneven glow, eyes darting, wide with fear. The figure stopped at the center of the courtroom. Every step before had carried sound. This one carried silence, their eyes locked with the judge's, unyielding, unblinking. "You think your robe shields you?" the figure said softly. "But robes burn just as easily as flesh." A sharp intake of breath echoed from the gallery. The bailiffs tensed. But the judge raised his hand, halting them. His voice was steady, but beneath it lay the weight of a storm. "Name yourself. Now." The figure tilted their head, a faint laugh slipping past their lips. "I have worn many names. Juror, officer, witness, even counsel. But in this court," they leaned forward, voice sharpening to a blade, "I am the verdict you fear most," the officer broke, shouting through trembling lips. "He is the one who ordered it. He told me to strike, to provoke." "To silence!" Chaos erupted again, voices clashing, bodies shifting. The judge slammed his gavel down with such force the wood splintered. "Order!" The figure never flinched. Instead, they spread their arms wide, as if welcoming the panic. This trial, they declared, was never about justice. It was about control. "And now, Judge, control is slipping from your hands." The judge rose, the full weight of his authority radiating through the chamber. But deep inside, a chill coiled around him because for the first time, he sensed this figure was not bluffing. Not at all. The judge's robes swayed as he stepped down from the bench. The sound of his shoes against the stone floor echoed like drumbeats of war. The figure's grin widened, as if the judge's knuckles whitened against the gavel. A chill crept up his spine, the kind that came not from the cold air, but from recognition. The figure stepped closer, their face tilting into the dim light. "Years ago," they whispered, "you sent a man away." The judge's pulse quickened, though his expression fought to remain unbroken. "You do not belong here," he said firmly, his voice faltering at the edges. The figure's grin deepened. "Oh, but I do. You gave me this place, Judge. You carved my role with your own verdict," the gallery murmured, shifting with restless unease. The jurors leaned forward, caught in the pull of something they could not fully grasp. The officer turned pale, his eyes darting wildly between them. "What man?" someone asked from the crowd, their voice trembling. The judge did not answer. He could not. The memory clawed at the back of his mind. An old case, a name he thought buried. The figure raised their hand slowly, almost reverently. "You thought justice was blind," they said, "but blind eyes still remember shadows." The judge's lips parted, a whisper slipping free before he could stop it. "It cannot be you." The figure leaned closer, their eyes burning. "It is." The silence that followed was unbearable. And in that silence, every soul in the courtroom felt the truth. This trial was no longer about law. It was about unfinished vengeance. The judge's throat tightened. The gavel in his hand felt heavier than stone. The figure's presence pressed closer, suffocating, forcing memory to the surface. "Tell them," the figure urged softly, almost kindly. "Tell them what you did." The gallery shifted, eyes wide, every soul leaning into the moment. The judge's chest rose and fell, his breath uneven. He tried to speak, but the words tangled in his mouth. The figure's smile sharpened. "Then I will remind you." They took another step forward, their shadow stretching long across the courtroom floor. "You sentenced a man who begged for truth. You silenced evidence. You silenced witnesses. You silenced me!" Gasps rippled through the chamber. The officer muttered frantically, "This is madness! Lies! Lies!" But no one listened to him. The judge's face drained of color, his silence louder than denial. The figure's voice grew stronger, resonant, carrying through every corner of the room. "You called it justice, but it was theater. And when the curtain fell, I was the one left in the dark." The judge's hand trembled as he finally forced words past his lips. I did what the law required." The figure's laughter cracked through the air like glass. "The law?" they echoed. "The law required nothing. It was you who demanded the verdict." The crowd erupted in whispers, fear and suspicion weaving together, and then silence again. The judge's eyes lifted, heavy with guilt, heavy with something darker, because deep down, he knew the figure was not lying. He remembered every word. The judge sat slumped, his eyes heavy, his confession still echoing through the chamber. The gallery's whispers grew louder, overlapping until they became a storm of voices. "Guilty," someone repeated in disbelief. Another shouted, "Then what happens now?" The figure did not answer right away. They stood still, basking in the charged silence, their gaze fixed on the judge. At last, they spoke, calm, deliberate. The robe does not absolve. The gavel does not erase. His crimes must be weighed here and now. The words carried like fire, igniting the crowd. Jurors muttered nervously among themselves. A woman in the gallery stood, her voice trembling. "Then, do we decide?" The figure's eyes slid to her, and they nodded once. "You decide." A shiver ran through the room. The officer struggled against the bailiffs, shouting, "This is not a trial. This is madness! Someone stop this!" But no one moved to help him. The crowd had already shifted, no longer spectators, but executioners in waiting. The judge raised his head slowly, his voice raw. "This is not law. This is chaos." The figure leaned down, their eyes burning. "No, this is truth. And truth does not need your permission." The judge's heart pounded. He could feel the tide turning against him. The crowd's hunger rising, the figure turned, spreading their arms wide toward the people. "You have heard his guilt. You have seen his weakness. Tell me." Their voice dropped, sharp and dangerous. "What shall be his sentence?" The room erupted, voices clashing, verdicts shouted, rage spilling like floodwater, and in that storm, the judge finally knew. His fate was no longer his own. The chamber shook with voices. Some screamed for punishment, others pleaded for restraint. The noise rose like a violent tide, crashing against the walls. The judge sat frozen, his chest tight, each breath harder than the last. He searched the gallery for even one face of mercy, but mercy was drowned by fury. The figure stood in the center of it all, silent, letting the chaos swell. Then, with one raised hand, they silenced the storm. The room fell still. The air itself seemed to wait. The figure's eyes swept the crowd, sharp, measuring. "You hesitate," they said softly. "You argue. You waver." Their voice grew harder. "Do you not see? He never wavered when he condemned me." The words cracked like thunder. The judge lowered his head, unable to meet the eyes of the room. The jurors whispered among themselves, fear mixing with duty. One finally stood, voice trembling.